You're listening to STRUTCAST, weekly podcast dedicated to everything spring turkey hunting. Welcome to STRUTCAST. This is episode 3, and as I'm recording, we are inching up on full-fledged opening seasons here in Mississippi, Alabama. I know Florida is open. I think some of South Texas zones are open. And we're getting closer and closer to having a lot more season. And I'm actually leaving tomorrow to head to Alabama. And even though Mississippi is my home state, I'm hunting with some friends in Alabama for the opener. And Mississippi actually opens in the morning on Friday. And I'm excited to announce that we are going to release this podcast on Friday. I thought it would be good for everybody that's going to be traveling this weekend, heading to the camp to hunt, and with the momentum and the amount of guests we've got lined up to be on this podcast, I think we're going to make the effort to release 2 a week, maybe first of the week and end of the week, and at least through March and April, and try to provide as much as we can. Excited about how things are going. Continue to say thank you to everyone who is listening and following along, and continue to encourage you to interact with us. Send us an email. Check us out at strutcast.com. Share your pictures and videos and stories and all that stuff on our social media. You can find us on Facebook at The Strutcast and on Instagram at just Strutcast. And before I get into episode 3, I want to share with you a offer that has come our way, and if you follow along with my pages and some of the things that I'm doing, you'll know that I work for a company called Scree, spelled S-K-R-E, and Scree is a performance apparel, camo hunting gear, performance-based layering system, high-quality merino wool and poly fabrics, anatomical fit, lifetime warranty, size guarantee, and all of those things, a direct-to-consumer manufacturer, so the prices are kept responsible through that retail system. And if you will go to ScreeGear.com and you decide to purchase anything from Scree, you can use the code STRUTCAST at checkout to receive a 10% discount. Now, that discount won't apply to items that are already discounted or on sale, but anything else, use the code STRUTCAST, and you will receive 10% off at checkout. And I encourage you to check out the Scree Summit pattern. It looks great in the turkey woods. I wore it last year when we first debuted that camo, and there's lots of video and pictures out there on my social media as well as Scree where you can see that in multiple environments, and it looks really good. So for episode 3, we've got a great guest. This gentleman is a 3-time Grand National Calling Champion. He's the National Pro Staff Manager for Woodhaven and Apex Ammunition. He's also on the National Pro Staff for Old Tom, Mossy Oak, Thermacell, and True Glow. That is Mr. Scott Ellis out of Florida. And you can check out Scott's web show on YouTube at HuntQuest, and he's also got DVDs with calling tips and tactics and other great things you can find at ScottEllisHunting.com. And as always, all of the links to all of his partners and all of his pages and his different assets and things will be on the show notes page on the website when this goes live. So make sure you check that out. Check out everything Scott's doing. He's a great follow. The man's a straight-up turkey killer, so he's a great follow throughout the spring. He'll be in the woods a lot, and we're going to talk about a whole lot of different topics. So before I go to Scott, let's try to do a little bit of our reporting that we're gonna try to implement into each episode. Right now, we've had some youth seasons, and we've seen some success down in Florida and in Mississippi last weekend for the youth hunt. With the seasons open up this weekend, I got one question on Facebook. Someone asked me, with this front that's moving through the south, what do we expect from the birds this weekend? And speaking mostly of Mississippi and Alabama, those seasons open this weekend, and right now it's windy and it's raining, and the temperature's going to drop. It looks like we're going to be like highs in the 60s, lows in the 40s, pretty much across Mississippi, Alabama, most of that region. My take on that is tomorrow morning, it might be tough. They may be quiet. I mean, it's going to just depends on when this front gets through. If it's still windy and rainy and stuff in the morning for Mississippi opener, it may be kind of tough. But when that sun peaks out, maybe tomorrow afternoon, if the front passes through in that time frame, you may can get at least on some birds and get them roosted. Now, my opinion on Saturday and Sunday, and this applies to my hunting in Alabama, I believe that when the temperature drops, the turkeys tend to bunch up a little more. We've had a lot of warm temperature this week, and maybe they've started to bust up just a little because Mr. Jimmy Stafford referenced this in episode 2. What they learned in studying turkeys with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries in their biology work, the temperature has a great effect on the gobbler behavior. When the temperature gets above 70, they really start getting less tolerant of other birds, and they start strutting more and paying much more attention to the whole grand ceremony they're going through, waiting on the hens to be receptive and start laying. But as it gets colder, they tend to bunch up, and they tend to be more social. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have... I have had hunts where it was frost on the ground opening weekend, and the birds were just on fire and came right to a call, broke off from other groups of birds and all that thing. So that's just, I'm just talking about majority type of experiences, what you would expect. I think when these birds get in bunches like this, you'll probably hear a lot of gobbling, especially on the limb and early when they first fly down. They'll be playing off of one another. They'll probably be pretty vocal. How aggressive they get with courting hens and stuff, it's really going to depend on the sunshine and how high the temperature gets during the day, I think. But again, if you've got a good population of birds, there'll be some mature birds that are ready to go. And my advice would be to be social with them and to work them and be real patient. You're probably, if it's 40 degrees, which is the forecast, if it's 40 degrees at daylight on Saturday, I think you're probably going to have to work a little bit at it, not to get birds to respond, but maybe to get them in gun range, because they're probably not going to fight with each other and jump on a decoy. But they might. You never know. Like I said, I've had a lot of hunts where that happened, and it was really cold. But just speaking of what we've learned in turkey science and turkey biology, they do tend to kind of socialize more and bunch up more in colder temperatures. But we do have a lot of sunshine and beautiful weather in the forecast, so either way, get out there and enjoy it. It's going to be a beautiful weekend. So now we're going to go to Scott, and we're going to talk a lot about Osceola hunting. Florida is Scott's home state, and but we're going to go outside of that. We're going to talk about more than just Florida and Osceolas. We're going to talk a lot about Scott's experience as a competition caller, also about his take on hunting other subspecies in different parts of the country. So let's go and let's talk to Scott. All right, Scott, thanks for jumping on today, man.
I appreciate you having me on here, Locke. It's awesome, man. I love talking turkey, brother.
Yeah, well, that's what this podcast was really designed for. That was the concept that we came up with, is to offer more in the way of turkey talk. You don't find a lot of turkey podcasts. There's some, but
right.
Not a lot dedicated to the sport. And, we're all turkey fanatics. So that
Absolutely.
was where it came for me, is, traveling around during turkey season looking for content. So
yeah, people are always looking to learn something. And that's where I think I've had some success in what I do. Not only calling on the stage and competing, but just my instructional stuff that I had that we'll talk about at some point in the podcast. So,
well, that brings up an interesting point. Would just spend just a minute. I know a lot of people are probably interested more in the calling circuit. I've done some of that myself, but I know a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people every year, different places where I'm hunting and stuff, and asking questions about the calling competition and how to get into it and what's that really all about. So, with you being
right.
a 3-time Grand National champion, what's your take on the status of the calling competition circuit these days and what somebody might do to get involved in that?
Well, the first thing to do would be to go to nwtf.org and then go to events, I believe it is, and then you can drop down and you can filter it by banquets, calling contests, etc., shooting events, shooting sports, whatever. And the next thing, once you find a contest that's local to you, it's just about going and meeting people and polishing your turkey calling skills, because ultimately the calling stage is being judged by people. So it's very, very subjective. But what it does do is it teaches you to command a turkey call like a musical instrument. It teaches you to be able to make the sound you want at that moment under pressure. And it's probably more pressurized, if you will, when you've got judges behind a curtain as opposed to even a gobbler in front of you, because I think I'm more nervous with judges than I am with turkeys, because you don't have to make them. You can make a mistake. You cannot make a mistake on the stage, but you can with a gobbler. And when I say a mistake, you might have a yelp that has more front than back, or you might miss hang a purr up a little bit, and hens do that. Their purrs hang up a little bit. But when you're doing it on the stage, ultimately it allows you to do it on command when you're under pressure in a hunting situation. From there, you just meet great people. You can help, you can learn from other turkey hunters. You can learn to polish your calling in general. You can learn to sound more like a wild hen turkey, and that's going to kill more turkeys.
Yeah.
So I recommend going to a contest if you've never been. If you want to enter, if there's an amateur or a hunter division, enter the lower level stuff and get your feet wet and get a feel for what it's about. Watch it, witness it, and if it's something you're interested you, then give it a shot. We're always looking for new people to call in a contest. It's a lot of fun, a lot of camaraderie, and ultimately, again, you learn to master a turkey call and not be mediocre on a turkey call.
Yeah, that's a good point. The idea that the stage kind of prepares you in that moment of truth. Yeah, it prepares you with the pressure of the moment. I'm curious, what would you say to I hear this a lot. This is where this question comes from. What would you say to someone who's maybe nervous or intimidated by the idea of competing, in something, with people that they view as more experienced than them, or, that kind of macho, peer pressure type thing.
Around your peers, and then just go at it. Go all in. I mean, it's just a calling contest. Nobody should judge you on your level of calling ability. Not me, not anybody that's won 10, 15, 20 Grand Nationals. Nobody should be judging anybody on their calling ability. It's just a matter of you having the kahunas to get up there in front of people and in front of judges and strut your stuff and give it what you got. So outside of that, record yourself when you're practicing. Use a video camera, record your calling exactly like you want to put the routines together. Because it's like this. I kind of left this out earlier. We have 1 minute for each call, and all we're doing is being an artist with sound. That's what we're doing as a turkey caller on a stage, a competitive turkey caller. You're painting a picture with sound. So just mimic and envision what a turkey would do when she's kikiing, when she's cutting, when she's plain yelping, when she's excited yelping, when she's cutting, and just paint that picture in that 1 minute routine. Now, you can apply those same type of routines to the woods. A lot of times it's going to be it's not going to be a full minute. It's going to be a shorter routine than a full minute. But just never be intimidated by anybody. It's easier said than done. Granted, it is. But just go up there and give it your all. Take a deep breath and get on that stage. Count backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Set yourself and then start your calling, and then enjoy the moment. People are there to watch you call. So it's almost, I kind of think of it as a rock concert. People are coming there to watch these guys call, watch us call. So why not get up there and give it all I got and show out a little bit and say, hey, I'm this good. And then just know that those guys ain't got the kahunas to get up on that stage and do it. So you're one up on them anyways.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found with a lot of new people coming into a contest, and most of my experiences in state contests, I've never actually went up to Grand Nationals and entered and competed. But one of the things I find that I think most new guys, where they mess up, is they don't have a plan, and like you said, it's a routine. You need to have an idea of what you're doing. You can't just you go up there and start yelping, and before you know it, you've carried on way too long.
You're repetitive. That's the one killer.
Yeah, I found that, and I think that preparation does build confidence. If you know what you're going up there to do, even if you're not, maybe you don't feel like you're completely ready to hit it flawlessly, but you have a plan and you've practiced that routine and you know what you're going to do when that judge gives you the call to make, I think that helps a lot too.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an orchestrated piece of music, but you have a structure that you're wanting to follow. I don't have an exact note for note routine for anything, but I know when I go to cut, I'm going to start slow. I'm going to build excitement. It's a triangle. This is a great example of a competition level cutting routine. When I start slow, I build excitement. The peak of that triangle is her just getting absolutely nuts. Some machine gun cutting, if you will. She's super excited. And then she finally calms down and that triangle starts dropping on the other end of the triangle and you start slowing down and then giving that perception that she's calmed her nerves a little bit. She's not too wound up. So there in a minute, I've used a triangle, if you will, to paint a picture of starting to get excited, getting excited, and then the excitement waning at the end of the routine. Yep. And that's what you have to do. And I mean, note for note, no. Plain yelping, don't be repetitive. You're not necessarily building an excitement level because plain yelping is in fact what it says is plain. It's just a hen easing through the woods, yelping, looking around, maybe looking for company. She's just yelping. She's talking. She's just blabbering, if you will. But mix it up with 2-note yelps, 3-note yelps, 8-note yelps, 3-note yelps, front end yelps with no rasp, a couple clucks. Just mix it up, and that mixing and not being repetitive is going to be something that will score points for you.
Well, that's good info. I know a lot of people. I get a lot of questions, and that's great info from somebody with a lot of experience. Moving into the reason we do all this calling contests and everything else, we like to hunt. I know I've following you along on social media. You've had some success. Florida, you hunt out of Florida. South Florida's already open. So how's it looking down there? What are you hearing and seeing?
It's been Ellis family's 2 for 2. The youth hunt was the last weekend in February, which is the weekend right after Grand Nationals, which is awesome because I'm at the Grand Nationals calling and competing, and I'm bragging. I'm just saying, I'm bragging that Jake and I are going to be in the woods next weekend, and Jake's going to be trying to kill a turkey, which he did do. Jake killed one in the youth hunt on the first opening weekend for the South Zone youth hunt, and then last weekend was the regular South Zone opener, and I managed to call in a bird for a buddy and call in a bird for myself. So we're on the board. It takes the pressure off. It's awesome. Good. It's always good to kill one down south because for me, I mean, it's not but a minute or two, and I'm going to be traveling out of Florida. I don't hunt a whole lot in the state, even though I'm from the state. I hunt 3 or 4 weekends, and 2 weekends of that includes Jake's youth hunts, which we're doing this weekend. The regular season youth hunt opens this weekend, so I'm taking Jake up for a hunt this weekend, filming for Hunt Quest, my show on YouTube. And then after that, I'm going to do the opener, and then, Georgia probably the next weekend. I'm starting to travel on out of Florida. So a lot of my season is encompasses Jacob, my son, and getting him there. And if I can kill a bird in between somehow, then I feel like I've done something really good because I'm not all about the numbers anymore. I, as much as I love to call them in, I'm not as mad at them as I used to be, but I do like to shoot one at least everywhere I go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm in the same boat. I hunt out of Mississippi, and our youth season, well, as we're recording this will be last week, but as it is today, our youth season opens Friday, so we're going to be getting after them Friday. And I'm kind of the same way as you. I don't get to hunt at home very much, just a couple of weekends throughout the year because I'm on the road a lot, and I know how that goes. One thing that I'm curious, I've never talked to anybody that would have any insight in this. Last week as you're listening to this, I had 2 gentlemen on the podcast for our second episode of the season that are retired Louisiana State biologists, and they both played a pivotal role in the big restocking program back in the 70s and 80s that really saved turkey hunting in the state of Louisiana. I'm curious to know, as a resident there, what is the state of the union, so to speak, in Florida in terms of, we all deal with habitat loss and urbanization and all that. I mean, what's the population of turkeys like there, and what are you seeing, and how do you feel like that's going in Florida?
Hunting them as much as I do in the state, which is about, I probably only hunt in the state of Florida. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, maybe 12, maybe 2 weeks total of the season, two entire weeks altogether, consolidated. I think predator control is very key. And then outside of that, I think the water levels in Florida play a very key factor in where we're at with our turkeys. Hens will renest. We know this from a biological standpoint. Hens will renest. This year, we've had a very wet winter, and places that I'm looking at hunting in a couple of weeks here. And when I told you for the regular opener, places I killed birds on 2 years ago are now underwater. So, and that water starts in the winter, and it could carry into the spring, and it could maintain depending on how wet our spring is. So I think the weather plays a key part in Florida's turkey populations. There's a ton of people hunting them. Florida's a destination state. Pressure definitely plays a key role, especially on the public lands. And they're also now, Florida FWC has now opened up, in 2020, the majority of the management areas, the WMAs, are going to be open to hunting all day long, which is like that in many, many states now. So I think that's going to play a very pivotal role in the hunting quality, not necessarily the populations, but I think the more pressure. I mean, people are coming to Florida to kill Osceolas by the droves. People come here to finish a Grand Slam.
Right.
And I think when they start opening it up to all-day hunting, it's going to make hunting even more difficult. Will that affect the populations? Not necessarily, because I think the pressure is going to end up making them even harder to hunt than they are. And they're plenty hard enough to hunt, only hunting to 1 o'clock, especially if you're in areas that have pressure. That's always been my thing. I mean, what's the easiest subspecies to hunt? There is no easy subspecies. It just all depends on the amount of hunting pressure and human contact they have. But we obviously in Florida, urbanization, as you said earlier, is a huge factor. Going back to that, because Florida is being developed daily. Florida, the lands in Florida are diminishing rapidly because of people moving in the state. People from up north, people from other countries, everywhere. And the developments, now that the real estate boom is increasing again since 2006 when it crashed, they're clearing land left and right. So I think habitat destruction is going to be a huge part. I think predators play a huge part in any state's turkey population. The raccoons are a huge issue. Hogs in Florida are a huge issue because a hog will devastate a turkey nest as quick as she smells it. A boar or sow will eat a turkey nest in a second. So hogs play a key role. Coons play a key role. Possums, even skunks for that matter. So the best thing I can say is that I think Florida's doing okay from the properties that I've hunted over the last, we'll call it 5 years. But I think the state's got to take notice. And it's ironic that they're actually taking notice by allowing hunting all day on public lands. So it'll be interesting to see how that has what effect that has on the properties in the near future.
Yeah, I can attest to that personally. But I've only hunted in Florida twice, and both times I lotteried a tag in the Seminole Forest.
Yeah, that's a good piece. Yep.
Yeah, and the first year I went, we actually were fortunate enough we drew the first week, and we both killed a bird. It was great. The second year, we drew the second week, and when we got there had been a ton of pressure the week before, and we didn't have great weather either, and we only killed one bird. But with that being said, on both trips, just scouting in the afternoon, there were opportunities to be had we been able to hunt past 1 o'clock. So I definitely see what you're saying there. That's going to open things. It's going to change things a lot because it was so much easier for us, in one way easier because we had that afternoon where the birds weren't being called to and messed with, and we could watch them and scout a little bit and have an idea what's going on without the hunting pressure happening. But then also, the pressure again on the other hand is getting ramped up and going to make everything more difficult. So
yeah, and what concerns me is the roosting areas of the birds. I think that as this thing gets off the ground next year, and all these WMAs that are allowing all-day hunting, all but just a handful are going to allow it. There's the diehards are going to be after them. The local people will probably be the people that you less worry about, but it's going to be the non-residents that are just dying to kill Osceola that are going to be the ones that are going to be putting that extra pressure. And they're going to be trying to identify roost areas. Now, it's a lot harder in Florida because there is, for the most part, lots of roost trees. There's a lot of area for turkeys to roost. And what I found with Osceolas after hunting for 34 years is that they will roost anywhere. I mean, it's more of an opportunist thing than it is a patch of cottonwoods in Kansas or Texas, you know what I mean, or Nebraska, when they only have certain areas they can roost. Florida, they can roost everywhere. So I see guys setting up, trying to identify roost areas, running and gunning. The only thing we got going for us is the fact that it gets so hot here by this time of the year that will be a deterrent for a lot of people, because even me growing up and hunting these birds, when it starts getting hot, I have no desire whatsoever there, unless I'm sitting under a shade tree in a big live oak hammock or something. I don't put a lot of pressure on turkeys in Florida unless I can just do that. And, so the temperatures will probably help the turkeys in a sense, because it may keep some of the hunters out. But it'll be interesting to see how it affects the hunting quality in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, for someone that's never hunted Florida, like you said, they're seeking their slam or they just want to kill an Osceola, I mean, where would you say is the best places to look? What time of the year to go? Some stuff like that.
In all honesty, the earlier the better in Florida, unless you're, again, I'm going back to hunting pressure, unless you're, again, hunting places that aren't pressured quite as much. If you're with an outfitter, if you're on a lease, or if you have the luxury of maybe finding somebody that has some private ground, which is far and few between in the state of Florida. If you're hunting the public grounds, the earlier the better. The earlier the better. If you're doing draw hunts, if you're just doing hunting management areas that are open, I will say there are birds to be had later in the season, but the sheer pressure and the human contact and the calling is so great in this state. It's truly another level than if you were to go to Wisconsin, which I've killed public birds on, South Carolina. I've killed public ground birds in Idaho and in Oregon, in New York, and Kentucky. I've killed public land birds all over the U.S., but these places, honestly, the turkey hunting is popular, but it's not a destination state. If you go to Kentucky to kill an eastern, there's 20 or 30 other states you can kill easterns in. So the pressure is not going to be as great. There's only one place in the world, and that is south of the line of demarcation is from Jacksonville to about Gainesville, from southeast to northwest, if you will, at a diagonal, and everywhere south of that is technically Osceolas. And there's a very limited amount of land on that peninsula that's left that you can hunt Osceolas. So the pressure itself is something that I would definitely recommend people trying to hunt as early as possible. The later you go, the odds are less in your favor, in my opinion. Not saying you can't kill one, but it's going to get harder and harder.
Yeah. You mentioned that you do travel a lot. I know you probably approach that slam most every year. I'm curious to know, outside of the pressure, we've talked at length about that at this point, but
right
outside of that, what are some of the primary differences you see in the hunt? I know it's kind of a cliche topic, but are there anything that you would really point to that separates hunting an Osceola from, let's say, an Eastern or a Merriam or a Rio?
Yeah, absolutely. General rule of thumb, less calling is more for Osceolas. Very often the terrain itself is a very, very deciding factor in how the birds act. And it's generally going to be thicker in the state of Florida. You might find a live oak hammock that's more open. You may be hunting on fields because there is a lot of pasture land in the state of Florida, but less calling generally is going to put you in a better position than, Easterns are a close second. Okay. You don't want to overcall an Eastern. They can be very fickle creatures. When you go out west and you start getting after Merriams and Rios, they're more flamboyant is the word I use. They gobble great. I love hunting Rios and Merriams just for that fact. They may whip your butt, but they still gobble for you, and you can still have fun with them.
Oh yeah.
Osceolas, being first in my list, and I've hunted Easterns for 25 years exclusively. So it's not like I'm a rookie hunting Easterns. I'm more of a rookie hunting Merriams and Rios and Goulds, and I've killed a couple Goulds too, than Easterns and Osceolas. And Easterns and Osceolas are a lot more fickle creature. They're not as tolerant to calling a bunch. They come in, they look, they take a peek, they're looking, they're taking a peek. And in Florida, as you asked, the terrain itself can be much more challenging because it's not as open. So the birds, they don't gobble as less because they can be ambushed by predators, coyotes, cougars. We have Florida Panthers, bobcats, even foxes. So they just, in my opinion, gobble less. And I love to play cat and mouse with an Osceola or an Eastern for that matter. And that's just calling a little less and just playing hide and seek, if you will. So less is more. Setup is very key to Osceolas. Again, mentioning the thicker cover, you want to be able to at least have visibility of where you set up, at least to gun range. But the setup can be very, very critical to Osceola hunting. Guns are stretching the limits on ranges now much more than they were 15 years ago, we'll call it. So you can get a little more out of your turkey gun with the right loads. I mean, I'm with Apex. I shoot TSS. I love it. It's an amazing shot. It hits like a freight train. It's more dense than lead. You can shoot a little farther. So be cognizant of your setup and give yourself, if you can, enough visibility to have that shot, because a lot of times you're shooting 20 yards because it's all you can see.
Yeah.
If you're hunting fields in Florida, if you don't, you can run deeks, and deeks are successful. I have no problem with people running decoys. I don't run them. But if I'm hunting fields and there is a lot of pasture in Florida, I always set up 20 or 30 yards inside the wood line, because if that gobbler hears the hen and then he can lay eyes where she should be and he doesn't see her, he's very likely not going to come in. If you pull inside the wood line where he hears that sexy hen, but he can't see her, he's more apt to come take a look. And that's what I call hiding the hen. And that's how I learned to hunt without decoys. And that's in any terrain. But fields in Florida are a great example of that in itself.
I'm going to share something with you, and I want to get your take on it. This little conversation we're having right here plays into it. So the gentleman that I had, the biologist that I had on last week, he's got a book titled Wild Turkeys in Louisiana. You can get it on Amazon, and he's spent his entire life studying turkeys. And he has a theory that I found really compelling. So, and it plays into what you talked about, how birds in thicker cover and terrain where they're being vocal can actually be a vulnerability for predation. He talked about how he theorized that possibly the drumming of a gobbler was more of a communicative call than maybe we've ever really thought. And he
100% agree.
And he compared it to a study that was done in Africa with elephants, where they found that elephants were making this deep groaning sound that other elephants could hear up to like a mile away, and people and other animals could only hear up to about 20 or 25 yards. And it makes perfect sense, but I never thought about the fact that a bird that's drumming may be trying to intimidate other gobblers if he's strutting around a hen.
Or he's trying to draw in hens without gobbling.
Right.
I 100% agree with that man's theory. I don't know his name or what book he wrote other than what you just said, but I agree with that man 100%. It can be very deadly call to use if you can emulate it, as in, if you can do that with your voice to create a little bit of volume, and it's a very deadly call. It's like it's almost like gobbling to a gobbler to challenge him.
Right.
But you're just, if I've had a bird that's hung up before and I knew he was there and I could maybe hear him drumming, and you can hear a bird depending on the terrain and the wind, you can hear a bird drumming for, I've heard them 70, 80 yards drumming depending on the terrain. And I've actually I've done that and actually got birds to respond and come in looking for the other gobbler that he thinks has slipped in to his hot girlfriend that he's heard yelping and cutting and clucking and purring and everything else. But I think it's a very, very effective communication tool for the turkey when they don't gobble, because they're apprehensive about gobbling due to predation. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was an interesting. We talked in depth about it, and I found it to be really interesting. And another thing that he talked about in that book that I didn't know, and this was absolute fact, they had brought, during the restocking program, they actually brought Florida Osceola birds into southeastern Louisiana and the Mississippi Gulf Coast area trying to restock, and they don't have statistics that say that really took off or that it kept, but it is obvious that there are some genetic traits that are going to linger. Some of those birds did reproduce. A huntable flock, they don't have statistics that prove that they captured a huntable flock and kept them. But, what you're saying, what we refer to as the Florida parishes here in the Gulf, southeastern part of Louisiana, and even on the southern part of Mississippi, you do see a lot of birds with dark patterns on their wings, and they act a lot like Osceolas. It's
exactly what we're discussing. Yes.
So,
and ironically, I don't know of where the restocking was in South Carolina, but I've actually killed South Carolina gobblers. I killed one last year. If you'll go to my Hunt Quest page and look at my photos, I killed one in South Carolina last year that weighed about 14 pounds. He had about inch spurs that were hooked and sharp as a razor, and he would have passed for an Osceola all day and every day, even in South Florida. I mean, almost no distinctive white barring. It was mostly black, very little white. And I have heard stories of exactly what you're referring to in the swamps of Louisiana and Mississippi on the is it coastal areas you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, inland a bit, but what you would refer to primarily as coastal, yeah.
Right. So yeah, I've heard the exact same thing, and those genetics have got to be passed on. They have to be. If you're seeing that signs of that, I'm sure you get genetic anomalies, if you will, where it's just like I mean, I've killed Osceolas in Punta Gorda. I'm in Central Florida. Okay, I'm like 3 hours south of the line of demarcation for Florida Osceolas, where I live here in Central Florida. But I've killed birds 2 hours south of where I'm at, just north of the Everglades, that look just like an eastern. One of them weighed 21 pounds, and he had white barring more predominantly than black. But he's still an Osceola technically, but he was not. I've killed Osceolas. The one I killed last weekend, almost predominantly black. Very, very lightweight, probably 14, 15 pounds. My bird, he had like a 9-inch beard, and his spurs were sharp as a razor, but they were only about an inch, 3/7/8. That's it. But I did not believe that was a 2-year-old turkey. Yeah. I believe in my heart that bird was older than that. He was just more of a pure strain Osceola.
Yeah. Well, they say that technically there's really not, other than just geographic, inherited, or evolved traits. There's not that much. There's really not that much of a biological difference in turkeys. It's more what they evolve into based on where they live. So it's that gray area in between all the different subspecies. And then we're also talking about a bird. I mean, amongst all the animals in the world, birds have more anomalies in their feathering and coloring and genetics than mammals do anyway. So,
right.
That's it's cool. I know it's amazing to me. A lot of people I talk to that about Osceolas. It I guess it's because of the landmass area. People they're misunderstood. People just really don't understand what they're dealing with and how I mean, I hate to use too big of a broad of a term, but I mean, this is a very what's the word? Isolated type of deal. I mean, it's really special to kill a pure Osceola. They're hard to find.
Right. As are white-tip Merriams.
Oh yeah.
White-tip Merriams are becoming a rarity anymore. In places that are deemed Merriams, you're getting hybrids, you're getting creams, you're getting peanut butters, you're getting white secondaries on the fan, and then cream tips on the primaries. I mean, it's hard to find. I think that they're crossbreeding and they're overlapping in boundaries, and the genetics are overlapping and crossbreeding throughout the country, to be honest with you. I've killed Osceolas in Florida that looked like a Rio Grande. And there is no explanation of that. About 45 minutes south of where I lived, I called in a bird from my buddy about 2 or 3 years ago, and the bird, I'll have to share pictures with you offline, it was caramel. The secondaries and primary tips on his fan looked just like a caramel tips Rio. Yeah. You explain that to me. Yeah. And did we put Rios down here at some point to retransplant them? I don't know.
I think my theory is just very generally encompassing lots of different topics. The general influence of human pressure, and it's good and bad. The positive of it is we're protecting our species as outdoorsmen. Sure. And we're helping them be sustainable. But in doing that, we're moving them around. Our land, we're losing habitat, and it's changing those boundaries, and it's forcing that crossbreeding that you referred to. My theory is in a different kind of way than maybe we even take into account at times. It's just there's with the amount of cities and neighborhoods, and then also the programs we're doing where we're moving birds around, and we're adding human influence into natural, the natural breeding and reproduction and recruitment process year after year. It's gonna muddy the waters. But hey, my opinion is, as long
if he gobbles, he's good to go.
Yeah, and as long as we got a huntable population of turkeys, I'm good with it. I'd rather have a hybrid turkey than no turkey. So
Exactly. And I mean, in stating that, you do want to come to Florida and shoot a black wing Osceola. You do want to go to Northwest Nebraska and shoot a white wing, or Montana or Wyoming or Idaho. There's a lot of Merriams in Idaho, Colorado. You want to go get that pure strain bird. But in the reality of it is, it doesn't always work out that way, especially when you have a limited hunting time. You're on 3 or 4 days of hunting. You shoot what comes into the call, and it is what it is.
Yep.
And I think people get hung up on it a little bit too much.
Well, moving on to some, I guess maybe some tips and some technique type of conversation here.
Sure.
One of the things that I talk to people about a lot of conversation I find myself in a lot is I think one of the big challenges for new hunters or just inexperienced hunters is the early season dynamic, and you'll start seeing it as these seasons open. Some states open really early, and the flock dynamic, these birds really, they have a very finite time in which they actually breed and lay eggs, and there's this whole grand process that goes on to define the pecking order, and hunters oftentimes interpret that as more than what it is, and it makes hunting difficult because these birds don't bust up. Early season tactics seem to be the hottest topic that I find myself talking about. People can't figure out, hey, man, this bird's gobbling his head off, but he will not come. I can't get one to break off. What are some of the things that you've done, you found success in when you're dealing with these early season birds that they're following the hens around, but as an experienced hunter, these hens aren't standing or they're not breeding. And so you're stuck between this hen's not going to leave him, and he's not going to leave her. What are some of the techniques that you found useful and successful?
Well, when you say they're not going to leave him, I would debate that, because a great tactic I use early season, I did it last weekend, and one of them I use a lot, even in mid-season, is the Kiki run. One of the most overlooked, underused calls in the spring is the Kiki run, and that's not necessarily calling to the gobbler, although a whistle, when you're keying, will jerk a gobble out of one when nothing else will. I've had a bird turn around and do a 180 by keying, but more importantly is calling to the hens. And I love to give my dissertation on that early season stuff when they're henned up and they're not nesting yet, and there's not a lot you can do if he has a harem. The easy answer is to find a subordinate that doesn't have hens. That's the easy answer. Those are the ones that I love. But ultimately, when they do, you have to develop your tactics as you go and encounter these different types of flock patterns. And calling to the hens is one of the things I love to do. And I'll just leave you with this little tip. Remember, there's 2 personality traits that boss hen that's in charge of that harem has. She's the one that's probably going to be the most vocal. She's the one that's going to dictate what happens in that flock. And one of the things I love to do is to never, ever, ever get aggressive too quick. Guys, you hear this year in, year out. Oh, I heard that hen. I started cutting to her and caught on top of her, and she got mad and came right over and brought the flock over. That's great. That works 20%, 30% tops of the time. But my theory and my dissertation is always start civil. Having nice conversation with those hens. If you identify that he has hens, you get those hens yelping to you, just yelp to them. Don't start cutting and being aggressive and challenging them or challenging her, the boss hen. She's the one that's going to dictate what the flock does 9 out of 10 times. Be very civil. Start with basic clucking and yelping, and then only escalate your calling if it needs to be. And let me go backwards in what I was saying. The personality traits are going to be, she's the aggressive, dominant hen that you can cut at and challenge, and she's going to bring the flock over, which is about, to me, less than the next type of hen that you're going to encounter. That's the boss hen, and she's the coy, passive hen. And if she's the coy, passive hen that's non-confrontational, and you start cutting immediately at her and getting aggressive, what's she going to do, Locke?
Oh, yeah, she's going to tuck tail and go the other direction.
She's going to go the other direction and take the gobbler with her. Exactly. It makes perfect sense. It's perfect algebra here. Don't go too aggressive too quick. Only dictate your calling based off what she does. Now, if she doesn't ever get to that next level of excitement and she yelps and she ends up wandering off, then maybe you want to challenge her at that point. That's when you have to escalate your calling to try it. but don't start it too quick with the aggressive calling. Always start civil and soft, and only elevate your calling excitement level, your challenging level, if it dictates it. If her calling dictates it. If she ends up walking off and never gets excited, then you go in and challenge her. That's fine, but don't start off doing it.
Yeah.
I'm getting repetitive, but just I feel like I got to be redundant. Start soft and civil, and that will kill you a lot of turkeys that have hens, because you can call them in. And the next thing is going back to what I said a minute ago, and that's kiki running. Because my theory, I love theorizing about turkeys, and I have my own that have worked very well over the years, is simply the fact that I've kiki run to a flock of hens. And my theory is that sometimes if you're not challenging her and you're not getting aggressive too early, like I'm spouting this over and over again, and you kiki run, sometimes that brood hen is an old hen. Sometimes she's just a 2-year-old, just like a 2-year-old gobbler. But a lot of times she's a brood hen. And when you start keying, she thinks that there might be a Jenny over there that's lost and needs company. And turkeys are what? They're very gregarious. They're social animals. So if you start keying, you may entertain the fact that she is a brood hen, and you're going to capitalize and exploit her maternal instinct. And she might go, well, who is that little lost girl over there? I got to come check her out and see what's going on. And I did just that on Saturday last weekend in the South Zone. I was doing some kiki run sequences. We were blind calling. There was nothing gobbling. It was super foggy. There was nothing going on. And I was doing kiki run sequences. And about 10 minutes later, 3 hens come charging in. And if you look at the butt of a turkey's wing, whether it's a gobbler or a hen, and you look at the butt and those secondary feathers on the butt, if they're even all the way around, then you've got a mature turkey, whether it's a hen or a gobbler. Okay, so if you ever get maybe I'm preaching to the choir, you may know this, but for the listeners out there, if you ever get in a position where you've got a red head in front of you and you can't see a tail fan, maybe you can see the butt of his wing. Watch his feathers. If those feathers are nice and even on the butt of his wing, those secondaries, those dark feathers, and they're even, you got a mature bird. If they're broken, just like a high in the middle tail fan on a Jake, then you've got an immature bird. Hens are the same way. So needless to say, all 3 of those hens that came in that I'm telling you about were all mature hens, and they came in charging in looking for me because I was kiki running. Yeah. And if they had a gobbler with them, I was hoping they had a gobbler in tow. They did not. Yeah. But if they had a gobbler in tow, then it would have been game over. So just
it's a great lesson, though. I mean, it's a great that's the great thing about turkey hunting is when things like that happen. It's not a lost hunt just because you didn't get a gobbler in gun range.
No,
you proved a theory, and you learned something, and something you can carry with you on the next hunt. And that's right. I think everything that you just said, it makes what comes to mind when I listen to what you call your dissertation on that is. I think too many young hunters, the most common thing that you hear from people that are trying to learn, how do I call? How do I not just how do I make the sound, but how do I call to a turkey? And I think the number one thing that I took from what you just said that I would say to someone is don't go into any calling sequence or any setup with a preconceived notion of what calls you're going to make. Feel the woods out. Feel it out and feel the temperature
of what's
pulse. Going on. Yeah, because like you said, you may be saying the exact wrong thing for the flock of birds that you happen to be, wandered up
calling
on.
To. Right.
And that's so important.
And another thing I'll add, let me go backwards after my long dissertation there. Another great tactic for early season birds is gobbler yelping and Jake yelping. Yeah. That is something that has really become quite the rage in recent years, and people overlook it. And I think a lot of people kill turkeys doing it, and they don't even realize they're doing it, especially when they yelp slow and they don't put enough pressure on their mouth call, or they're running an old Lynch foolproof box call, an old cedar box call that has a deep tone, is those slow dragging yelps of a Jake or a gobbler. Yep. And I think a lot of times when you Jake yelp, and I love to Jake yelp and half gobble. I do it a lot on my tube call. I'll and I'll calc into a gobble, and that is very successful when you're hunting those early season birds because they may still be bachelored up. And if they're bachelored up, and then on the same token, I'll imitate a Jake and then answer with a hen. So those gobblers are hearing a Jake communicating with a hen, and they're going, "Oh no, that little boy is not going to get on my side action here. My little girlfriend that I hear sexy talking to me over there." And that's another thing that has been very, very, very successful for me is Jake and gobbler yelping.
Well, that calling sequence that you just mentioned is if you spent much time in the woods early season and you've been able to witness and observe and listen to one of those bachelor groups, that that Jake yelp with that half gobble, man, they do
Right.
that all the time in bachelor
All
reps.
the time.
You know,
Yep.
they just get to fussing with each other and
Yep.
running around, and the Jakes do it. I've even seen 2-year-olds do it.
Exactly.
And you know that is a very common thing. And you know, my number one thing that I try to do in any situation, whatever my situation is be real. You know,
Right.
don't try to tell the turkey something. You know, I don't want to dictate something to him. I want to be real to him.
Right.
And that little sequence, I've used that as well. And the same thing you're talking about, that little bachelor group communication type of call, and then follow it up with some hen talk, and then all of a sudden, like you said, you've painted a picture to that long beard in the area that, oh, wait.
Yeah,
That little group of punk teenagers over there is messing with my girls.
exactly.
You know, and that's been real successful.
And I'll end with yet another tactic that is very successful, and that's staging fights with fighting purrs.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry a wing everywhere I go. I carry a wing in my turkey vest, and I stage fights religiously. I'll even be blind calling, like not even responding, nothing I'm engaged with, but I will emulate not only Jakes and gobblers and adding my whines to it, which is you hear more commonly than not with gobbler fights, but just fighting purrs and cutting with hen fights. You don't hear hens whine so much when they're in a fight, when they're in a skirmish, but you hear gobblers. So I'll either emulate a gobbler fight with, you know, and that's your gobblers fighting. Hens are going to be, you know, they're going to be cutting more with the fighting purrs. And I'll emulate both sequences, and those are both very effective in either calling the hens early season, or it's like a schoolyard fight. We've all been there. Little Johnny and little Billy get into a fight and start raising Cain and yelling and screaming, and what happens?
Everybody comes running.
Everybody comes a running. Yep, exactly. And that's a great tactic. And that tactic has honestly worked good for me on a hung up bird when I can use my wing and not spook him, obviously. But when I've had a hung up bird staging a fight, I've had birds come running in to find out whoa, wait a minute. I heard all this hen talk. All of a sudden, two gobblers are fighting. Something's going on over here. I need to investigate. And I brought multiple gobblers over. I brought single gobblers over. And that's worked great early season. It's worked throughout the season as well.
Well, that all leads to a really good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about your new app. And people that are enjoying this conversation and wanting to find out more about this kind of stuff, tell us a little bit about the app and what all it can do for you and all of those pertinents.
Oh, absolutely. It's called Turkey Tech with Scott Ellis. It's available on the App Store and on Google Play, both your Droid platforms and your iPhone platform. It has me giving video instruction on a pot-style call and on a mouth call. On top of that, it has audio of me giving the calls, and it's also got audio of wild turkeys, which is also amazing to be able to listen to the actual bird do it. I mean, I tend to think I call pretty good, but there's nothing better than the real thing.
Exactly.
So on top of that, it has text tips that explain what the call is, when turkeys give the call, and when the hunter should give the call. There's 3 bullet points. On top of that, there's actually a recorder built into the app that accesses your microphone on your phone, and it allows you to record, and then you can loop over the wild turkeys or my calling to ensure that you got decent pitch and decent cadence and decent rasp, and you can compare the two. And if you're close, then you're probably doing pretty good. So it's literally a guy can take the app that has not a clue how to turkey hunt, read the tips that I was talking about, the printed tips, watch the instruction on how to recreate the sounds from cutting and cackling and clucking and purring and fighting purring and plain yelping, excited yelping, cutting. It's all there. I mean, all the major calls of the wild turkeys there. I think there's 8 different calls that I go over. And a guy could not have a clue how to turkey hunt and play with this app and engage the app for a week or two before he decides to go turkey hunting, and he has a little bit of an idea of how to go out there and potentially call a turkey in a range. So I'm very proud of it. Again, Turkey Tech with Scott Ellis. It's a great app. It's a great tool. I'm proud of it. I've had a lot of success in this industry and what I do outside of competition calling and just killing turkeys. And that's just instructing people and helping people become better hunters. Because my theory is like this: people in general are busy, They don't have a lot of the time or the dedication to run calls like I run calls because I competitively call. So they're going to get their calls out a week or 2 or 3 or maybe a month before season if we're lucky, and they're going to try to polish up what they're doing so that they're ready for turkey season. If I can help them go out there and have a successful hunt and become and harvest a gobbler, then in my opinion, I've done my job, because it's made that hunter have some bit of success. And it may not be, they may not kill but one turkey a year, but if it helps them with their success and it makes them a lifelong turkey hunter, then they're going to be engaged in turkey hunting and the legacy that we know is turkey hunting, which includes buying a hunting license and camo and shotgun shells and turkey calls and turkey vests and boots. And those guys are going to be the long-term turkey hunters. And that's what we want to continue our legacy, is people to engage our love for hunting these birds and continue to do it and not just jump in and out of it. You know, maybe do it one year, they don't have any success. They thought it was cool, they wanted to try it, and they didn't do very good at it. If I can help them along a little bit, and that includes my YouTube tips on my YouTube channel, which is called Hunt Quest, and which is my show on YouTube, my web show. If these tips and techniques can help people become successful, then they're going to ultimately probably be a long-term turkey hunter. And that's what we want to continue our legacy. We have to have new people, kids and first-time hunters that introduce to turkey hunting, and they end up carrying on what we love. And that's what we need right now.
Oh, absolutely. We have to ensure the future of
exactly
of our sport and all hunting, but we're talking turkey hunting, but all hunting and just the outdoor lifestyle that we enjoy, it's a privilege. It's not a right, and
right.
It should be a right. But at this point in our world, it's more of a privilege. And if we don't cultivate that passion, like you said, for people that are going to hang on to it and continue to do it and economically invest in it, it can go away. So I have to be honest, I'm a little bit jealous, because that is a fantastic idea, and I'm kind of jealous I didn't come up with it. I actually had a friend. I spent a long time in baseball, and I actually had a former very successful Division I college coach that I do a lot of technical work. And he had actually approached me one time about a similar idea with baseball, where he wanted to create an app where a parent or a coach or somebody could download this app and video a player swing and overlay it over a professional swing and see the differences, which is real similar to what you talked about. With the audio. It's a great concept. It's a great learning tool. I think it's awesome, and I encourage people to go out and check it out. I wish, when I was a teenager, and my dad is an outdoorsman and loved to hunt, but didn't really turkey hunt. It was just something that I kind of picked up as a teenager, and he encouraged me, and he took me to the woods and stuff. But I kind of taught myself that along with other friends, and we didn't have apps, obviously, phones, but something like that would have been awesome. I was stuck with the old Primo's Truth About Hunting calling tips VHS tape. That's what I had.
And I was stuck with cassette tapes from Dick Kirby and Quaker Boy back in the old days.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just cassettes and records from Penn's Woods and Loman, like vinyl, dude. I mean, I'm 44. I'm not ancient yet, but that's what I had when I was a kid, to learn the basic sounds and whatnot. And now there's just an information pipeline,
Oh yeah.
And but hey, I don't have a problem with it. You know what I mean? It's making people successful. It's creating longevity in our legacy of turkey hunting. And that's really why I started doing what I do about a decade ago with Mouth Call Magic 1 and 2, which are mouth call instructional DVDs I have out. They're available on my website, scottelishunting.com. Just throwing a plug out there, but they're great tools for learning how to master the mouth call. And that goes back to calling competitions and learning to create the sounds you want on demand. And then in learning the language of the turkey. And you put that together with good woodsmanship, and you've got your turkey serial killer.
Yeah.
And that the information is there. And like I said, people are busy. They're I don't want to say that they're lazy. That's not the word, but people just are not going to dedicate the time to become super proficient turkey callers. But if I can help them bump that learning curve along a little bit, then I've done my job. I've helped them become a little more successful, and those people are going to continue to turkey hunt because they've had a little bit of success.
One last thing before we run out of time. Maybe I'm asking for my own personal information here, but maybe I'm not. Somebody else is going. A lot of people. I do a lot of video for some of the products and brands that I represent and work with, and do media stuff, and I've heard you talk a lot about the fact that you don't use decoys. And with your Hunt Quest show on YouTube, I've watched some of that, and it's interesting to me. I use decoys a lot, not all the time, but I use them a lot, and I use them primarily for the camera, because obviously the decoy puts me in a position to stage a live, real-life hunt as best as I possibly can, obviously by getting that bird in the position I need him in for the best quality video. So I'm just curious, what are your takes on, I know you have some challenges. A bird that comes in looking is totally different than a bird that comes in strut, where I can
locked
set
on
up
a decoy.
Yeah, I can set up away from the decoy where he's not looking my direction, and I can get away with so much more. So, like, what are the, I'm curious to hear from another guy who's doing some of what I'm doing. Like, what are some of the challenges you have in the video moments there where you don't have that visual prop that sets the stage?
Yeah, you said it already. They come in looking. A lot of my hunts, if you, like you said, you've watched Hunt Quest and you see me, I don't think there's a single episode of me with a decoy. I've killed a couple of turkeys over 30-something years. A handful, like literally on one or maybe two hands, we'll call it, I've killed in front of deeks. But they don't lock in. They're coming in. They're looking for the hen, which is what I called earlier, hide the hen. That's the way I set up, because when they come in and they finally get to the position they can see the hen they should hear, then they're dead. It's that simple. So the biggest challenge that I find with video and without deeks is you're getting a bird coming in very alert, very wary, very looking. He's not necessarily coming in full strut. Now they do it every now and again. You get one that's just hot to trot, and he's showing out, and he's just showing out. But more times than not, even with 2-year-olds, they come in looking and they're alerted, and they're trying to find the hen they're hearing. And very often that does not present all the strutting around the decoy and all that. And quite honestly, to me, that's a more pure type of hunt, when you're luring that bird in with vocalizations as opposed to no visual.
Oh, absolutely, it is.
That's just where I learned to hunt them. Brief history. We could ramble on for 5 days, but I learned to hunt turkeys in the woods of Florida and public ground without decoys, doing just what I said, hide the hen. Now, what I found is that if you do that, you're going to sacrifice, like I said earlier, you're going to sacrifice the bird strutting around a decoy for 10 minutes and getting great footage of just a strutting gobbler. But in the end, the way that I learned to hunt was simply hiding the hen, using terrain, using cover, using elevation changes, using a bend in a road. And that is where I found myself being most successful. Now, I used decoys in the mid 90s when the feather how old are you?
37.
Okay, so you're only about 7 years behind me. So if you remember, in the mid 90s, that's when the feather flex decoys came out, and that's when the decoy rage started. Well, I bought a decoy because I thought, well, man, this is the best thing. I've duck hunted my entire life. I'm an avid waterfowler. So we use decoys for duck hunting. Why not use them for turkeys? So I bought me one of those feather flex, thought it was the next great thing. And to my dismay, I had numerous birds lock up on those deeks, stand there and look at it at 75 yards, tuck the wings and walk away. And it took me about 3 or 4 losses of gobblers when I believed in my mind I could have killed them the old-fashioned way that I learned to do it with, that I figured out this is not going to work for me. So I threw the good thing in the garbage and continued on hunting the way I hunt without decoys.
Yeah, well,
and that's it. Had I had super success, I may be different than I am now. If I'd have had 4 or 5 different gobblers come charging in the decoy and strut around it for 10 minutes, I might be different, but it didn't work for me. So I reverted back to what I learned to do a decade earlier, and that's not using them and playing hide the hen. So
you're always going to be best at what you know best. And look, for you guys that are listening, those hunts are pure and they're impressive. And coming from a guy who has a stockpile of footage of turkeys, one of the things that I thought about while you were talking there is as a video field producer, I would imagine not having one of the biggest camera challenges, aside from the bird being wary, is you have a much less predictable approach area. You don't know that bird, especially if he's an older bird, he's liable to come in completely opposite of how you're set up with the camera. because
Right.
he's just looking, like you said. And so I've killed plenty of them without decoys. I've spent a lot of time in the recent years using them more for the camera, but it's an interesting take, and it is impressive, and it is a pure way to do it. But like you said, I think what you said speaks volumes for any hunter. What is going to work best for you.
That's right. What you've had success with, yes.
You always learn and build on that, because you can try different things, and you can learn lessons from them, and they may work and they may not, but don't get too far away from who you are, because who you are is what's built your success to this point as a hunter. And if that's what stick with it.
That's right. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. And at the same time, in the same breath of what you're saying, don't be afraid to do something different either.
Right.
I have, like I said, I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Shane Simpson and Calling All Turkeys on YouTube. He has a great show.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hunting with Shane in Wisconsin 2 seasons ago, and we had these gobblers that skirted us out in this big old alfalfa field, and they gobbled a few times, and they wanted nothing to do with us. My best stuff, I was being sexy as I could be. Shane said, well, I got this Jake decoy. What do you think about me belly crawling? They went behind some cover and allowed us movement. He goes, what do you think if I can belly crawl that Jake decoy out there in like 2 or 3 minutes? This all happened in minutes. And get that Jake decoy. I said, you put the Jake out, and then I'll start Jake yelping and see if they don't see that red head from way off. And they were a good ways away. Shane belly crawled. It looked like a snail crawled through there. Got the decoy in a cow manure pile where he got it elevated a little bit.
Yeah.
And belly crawled back to the camera. And when he got in position, and then the bird, we actually glassed the birds, and they were way out there. And I started, go, 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 go. I was doing the half gobbles, and those gobblers peered their heads, and they turned and looked, and they saw that Jake decoy from like 200 yards and immediately turned and closed in. So all I'm saying is have a very deep bag of tricks, whether it's setup, whether it's changing the voice of the hen, whether it's calling aggressive, whether it's calling quiet, whether it's fighting purrs, whether it's gobbling at him. Have 50 different plans to get in your mind that you can go through before you lose contact with that gobbler. And a lot of times that one of those things will end up sealing the deal. Too often hunters get stuck in a rut. So I'm not negating what you said, but a lot of guys do get stuck in that rut, and they only have one way they hunt, and that's the only way they hunt. And they might kill turkeys here and there, but they would be a lot more successful if they thought three-dimensional and thought outside the box and just had all these different tactics to throw at the turkeys. And that's what will also make you a lot more successful. So don't get stuck in that same rut. Be experimental. Try something new. Don't be afraid to try something new.
That's a very good point. And this has been a fantastic conversation.
I love it, buddy.
We had said before, you got a lot of stuff going on. We've talked about a lot of it. You'll be able to find a lot of this stuff on STRUTCAST.com, and I'll share some of that with you here in closing on the podcast. But, I want to wish you safe travels. I know you're going to be traveling around like a lot of us turkey hunters, safe travels, and Good luck in the woods, and maybe we can catch up and get a little update on what's going on later on in the spring.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm honored to be here, and I want nothing more than to share a little bit of success and a little bit of things along the way that's helped me to be successful. And best of luck to you. Spring is upon us. I'm super excited. I'm already on the board. Woohoo! So, I've got me a Florida bird. I'll seal it down, and that's always a great, great feeling to have one under your belt early like this. So, best of luck to you too, Locke.
Well, thank you, man. Thanks again for joining.
You bet.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation. I have watched and followed Scott from afar for a long time. I think he is a great part of the turkey hunting community. He's obviously accomplished a lot on the competitive calling circuit, and with his Hunt Quest show on YouTube and his hunting tips and techniques and calling tips and techniques DVDs, he's offered a lot in the way of turkey hunting, and a very accomplished hunter, and dare say he's helped out a lot of people. And we need as many people like Scott as we can in this industry, a true steward of the sport. And I thank him again for taking the time to jump on the podcast. I want to remind you again about the 10% coupon code STRUTCAST at SCREEgear.com. Check out Scree Gear. Their summit pattern will be great for the spring turkey woods if you're in the market for turkey gear. Check out Scree if you decide to to get into some scree, you can use the code STRUTCAST at checkout for a 10% discount. And in closing, encourage you to follow us on Instagram at STRUTCAST, find us on Facebook at The STRUTCAST, and check out our website, strutcast.com. Share with us, interact with us. We want to get your stories, your pictures, your videos involved in this podcast and hear from you, what you want to hear, guests you want to hear, and all that. And as always, keep our legislatures, our law enforcement officers, our lawmakers, our biologists, and everybody that has a hand in advancing this sport of turkey hunting and all hunting. We all need to band together and protect our rights and privileges for future generations. And with that, we will talk to you on the next episode.